What if I want to make this base color a bit more affected by either wear or use or other things? So I'm going to say that I could play with my base paint, or I could create another layer to affect the color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually on on top of this guy, I'm going to create a new fill layer, and that fill layer I'm going to actually move it below my base layer. Let me just move it right there. And my fill layer, I'm going to apply to it. I'm going to affect to it, not the height, not the norm, but maybe just the color and the rough. I'm going to change its appearance so that it uses a material that is a preset material, so that can change some of the look of it. I'm going to use, for example, cobalt. You can play with either one, but this cobalt has this kind of metalness behind it. So I'm going to suggest that I have that one, that if I turn off my base paint, which is on top, you see that the cobalt is a pre-created material already that gives some pretty cool believing affection of it. But I don't want to use that one. I want to use my that one underneath of this one, so that when the green is scratched, the other one shows up. So that's what I'm going to do. For that, of course, I need to just use the same technique that we used before. Under the base color, I'm going to just put this one under base, and under this base I'm going to create a mask for it, just a black mask again. So that one, of course, blocks the green for now temporarily, and under that base paint I'm going to create a generator, just the same way we did before. At this generator, this time I'm going to change again, use the same thing we did before, but this time I'm going to use a different type of thing. For example, metal edging, so that way that generates whatever the edges are going to be giving me scratches. So of course my idea of it is not this way. My idea of it is actually the opposite, meaning the greenish bluish tint stays on outside and the edges are going to be. So for that, I'm going to simply change the settings for that ground wear, and I'm going to go in, I'm going to invert it. So that way it uses the original settings that my base layer has, with some of the use, but this one has also additional things. So I can go and modify now the wear contrast, so you have more or less contrast. The wear level, so you can bring it down a tiny bit. The grunchiness of scale, so that you can make it a lot cooler, a little bit less maybe there. Ambient occlusion mask, so on and so forth. So you can play with your value there. Let's try to just bring it a bit more here, just to get, not that one, the wear mask, this one, not that one either. You can randomize it more, so you can get something a bit more interesting. Let me see if I can get it to look. Just change the scale right now, so that it can give me something like that. Alright, so that gives me a pretty good color and scratch all use, similar to what I had in mind. So if I want to add a bump to this element, so that I make it a bit more believable, I simply need to do the same process of creating additional layers to it. In this case, I'm going to go, right now I'm looking at the base color, and that's what it is. But if I can go to the height, I can change and create a new layer for that. So I'm going to create here a new, I'm going to go all the way to the top. I'm going to create a new layer, a new fill layer, and this one I'm going to call it bump for now. And so that I organize a little bit, I actually need to, I can create a folder, and this one I'm going to call it base paint. That way I can get all my layers that I did before, I'm gonna put it under my base paint layer, and I can just minimize it there. And my bump, I'm going to actually um, go back to it, and that one is going to affect height and nothing else for now. And I'm going to try to uh, of course assign to it a mask, just the same way we've done before. So I'm just going to create a black mask, and in that black mask I'm going to add a generator to it. On the generator I'm going to use a similar generator that I used before. That way my scratches match, or try to match, similarly to the other one. So I'm going to go back here and look at the metal edges. I'm going to click on it now. And you see it there is not really affecting yet. And that is because I need to go out of the generator, either out of the mask and go back out to the layer color section, and I'm going to go scroll down under the height so that I can manipulate the amount of height, either going positive or negative, to try to generate the effect that I want to do. So you see, for example, of course, I can go ridiculously bad with it, but if I just do a little bit of it, that gives me basics for scratching. So now I can go back into my generator and I can play with the amount and with the placement and with scale and all that, so you can have a basic good sketchy surface that gives you a bit more of detailed information. So you know, this thing's been around for a little bit. Now I have a possible option here, because I, of course I have a bump as a added element to it, but what if I wanted this component to have additional color information or different color information that I want to add to it? So let's say it was sprayed, or it had some additional color that at some point got. So of course under my base paint I can go back and say, for example, that green color that I have, I can add to it some more information. So you see right now we have under that green color, we had added before a mask that allowed us to see the double layer of the underbase and the base on top of it. But I could also, on this, under the layer itself, I could add to it a paint fill or a paint, so that you see now the mask receives one thing and the paint receives another thing. So I can go now and try to make this paint possible for me to use and paint on top of it. So I just need to click on my paint layer here, my paint modifier for it, and I can simply go back and look for what do I have to paint on. I'm going to paint on only the color. I'm not going to do anything else. So I'm going to say I'm going to change my color here. I'm going to use could be a red or an orangey tone. I'm going to just try to change it a little bit to something a bit more orange-like. A bit more red, and it will be okay. Actually, let me just push it more in this direction. There you go. And then I just simply go, and because I'm painting there, I can use my brush and paint on it. I'm just simply adding color information to that little element. You just have to be, at least with this strategy, careful not to paint the background. So you simply just rotate around and stay painting on the center of it. And as you rotate, you simply stay rotating and painting in the middle. That way you don't risk painting anything outside of the centerpiece. So let me just go a little bit closer here and get a little bit better there, and little by little start adding information to my object. I can change the size of my brush there, so a little more careful with the corners there. At least this is strategy for you to be able to do it. There is some additional options for masking objects, but we're not gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna try to paint my object the best I can. You see my UV map right there. Oops, I just went back too far there, so undo that. Always can go and erase if I want to. If I need to, oops, for example there I painted on the front surface, I believe. You see it there, so I can just try to come here and erase that and go back and continue painting my object the best I can. I just have a little section left here. I'll never see this object this close in the rendering, but I just want to be safe. I try to cover the surface the best I can. Okay, so roughly I got that covered there. I just added my extra color on that object. That is when the object is probably the same piece, and you just want to paint a different color on it. You could of course add additional bump and even material to it if you wanted. It's a good idea to save for now. If now I want to add a little bit of rust onto this piece, I can just simply go and create another new layer, create another fill layer. Let me just bring it out of that folder there. Oh, move the wrong one. This is not it. I'm clicking on the wrong one right now. Remove that one. Do is the fill new one. Want to move it? Oh, for some reason I'm clicking on the wrong one. There it is. Here we go. Now I can minimize this one. This one I'm gonna call it rust. So of course this one is coming on top of it right there. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna change, and this one I'm gonna use a little bit of color, height, rough. I'm not going to be normal or metalless. And now I'm going to change. I'm gonna use base color. I'm gonna use that rust fine. So that gets added to the color of my object. I will also use the same one for the height and a little bit of the same of the roughness. So the three of them are using the same preset. And of course, if I turn it on, that covers the whole thing in that rust material. I just need to now go back in and paint on it, or work on it so that I can just use it wherever I wanted to change. Of course, I can change the attributes of this object by randomizing it if I want to, or manipulating each one of them individually or differently. I can also go back and say if I work on the height only, I can try to get the technical for the height so that you can just get it a bit more visible and change its value there. So now I'm going to just add to it a mask. That way I have control over it. And then in that mask, of course, I'm going to do some additional work where I am going to manipulate using a fill layer, just making sure that the fill layer is going to manipulate that level of the amount of control of roughness, or not roughness, but texture that my object needs. I'm gonna go and click on it. I'm just gonna scroll down to find an amount of. See if I can get that one. I don't like that one. Actually, let me just change that. See if I'm trying to just to find something that gives me some crunchiness of it. This seems to be a bit better now. You can tell that the bumps a bit too much. So I will of course play with the value of the height by going back to the main layer, scrolling down or clicking on the height only. I'm being able to manipulate the height, range and position. I think I lost it now. I make sure I'm working on the height. I don't want the color of the roundness, I want the height only. So I'm going to just manipulate the height position so the rust is not as dramatic there. When I go back to my rust now, so let me just turn on my color again in my rough. When I go back to my rust under my other part there, and I'm going to paint on it add a paint layer. In that paint layer I can try to work with painting in certain areas a bit more of that rusted information. Let me see if I can just do it a bit more here on the yellow part. And now I'm going to change the way the mode is working on it. So when I say subtract, that way I can paint with areas that I don't want it to have rust, if it's too big. So it's not my whole object, but those just certain places where it makes sense to me. I don't want to have any rust on top. Maybe a little bit somewhere here, maybe. And then I'm gonna try to then crank up some of the values for my grunge texture. And simply just scrolling up here under the grunge texture properties, I'm just gonna change the scale a little bit, rotating it a bit more. You can increase the scale or decrease it depending on what makes sense to you. If I go too small, it doesn't work. So if I go too big, it doesn't work either. So you're gonna stay somewhere where it makes some sense to you. can go back to this one and just click on it by accident here. Just call my tool here again. I don't know why I got that. There it is. Alright, so I want to, what I want to do here is add a bit more information to it so that I can be a bit more playful with that. So what I'm going to do actually, under the paint, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to use stencil. So I'm going to click on the stencil. I'm going to go and look for a stencil to give me something that I can use to paint my effect. Let's see if I can find something down here. Maybe this one. So now I have a stencil that I can go and try to do. Let me change that one. I don't really like that one. Let's see if I can find something a bit more. That one I think might be a little bit better. So I try to go and paint. Right now I'm on my paint. I'm going to change the size of my brush. And I'm going to try to paint some of it here. Actually, yes, this one is subtracting. I'm just subtracting a bit more there. Then I'm just going to turn off the stencil for a moment. I actually want to add it back there using the stencil in that section back there. So I'm going to add here a new fill layer, and in this new fill, I'm sorry, not a fill layer, a new paint layer, and in this paint layer I'm going to activate that stencil. This paint layer is going to be a normal style layer, so I'm going to go look for that stencil again. One of this here, that one could do it, this one could do it too. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to try to, on that layer, just paint. So you see that I'm just painting certain areas only using that stencil. I'm going to do a little bit of that here on that ball. Okay, just gonna turn off the extension, and for now I have my object roughly with the information that I want. I went a little too old, but I can always go back and tone down the opacity of the layer, of the rusting layer, so that I can change it or turn off some of those layers, so if I don't feel, or tone down some of the opacity if I feel they're a little too much. Okay, so that's part of the rust component of it. Maybe I'll bring it back a little bit, tiny bit. Save my file.